You're never who you were, but always who you decide to be right now. And that to me is our greatest gift as human beings.
Welcome to the show, Howard. Great to have you.
Thank you. It's great to be on. Appreciate it.
Jumping into your book right away, I think one of the boldest claims you make in Invincible is that we're all capable of more than we believe, but most people actually never access it. Why is that?
Well, I don't think they believe that they can. They don't believe that they're worthy of it. They see limitations in their own self. They haven't been brought up with a mindset that seeks to not only dream big, but also act on the dream and be able to be resilient enough when challenge does hit them to not embrace that as part of their identity, but embrace it as part of the journey. So it's a combination of a lot of factors that cause one's identity to really limit themselves.
One thing that kind of stands out in all of that is just how much of our past plays a role in that, our upbringing, past experiences, really shaping that belief in yourself, probably more than a lot of us even realize.
There's no question. It's very, very subconscious. And what I've learned on my road is that the identity is the compass of it all. And if you're not self-aware enough to know what your identity has been and how it's affected you and limited you, then you can't change it. So that's why really the first part of the journey towards personal empowerment or changing your reality or experiencing something different is you have to be able to look back and just be aware of what brought you to this moment and what brought you through some tough things that you may have gone through, and how to really look at it from a non-judgmental state of mind to help ease the burden on your soul and on how you look at yourself so that you can feel more worthy and empowered to move forward with that new energy. So identity is the key to it all.
In dealing with our clients, and certainly a lot of the youth that ask questions and things, I have a feeling that term identity is not very defined anymore. And it's been diluted to mean many different things. And if it's diluted, then there's no strength in it. So why don't we get into some of these examples of identity markers that people would need to be able to lean in on in order to access that power?
The way that I define your identity is the way that your thoughts, feelings, and actions, when you reflect upon yourself, affect your state of mind. So in the book, I break down the identity into three ways that it's been ingrained in us. The first one, the obvious one, is nurturing. From when we were born, how long we had to cry in the crib before we got changed or fed, determines a certain set point of fear versus faith, of how secure we are with our environment in general. That kind of love can leave us lacking things, or it can leave us feeling more secure. And then the second piece is how we go through our personal experiences. So when we start to develop an ego, like around 7 or 8 years old, we start to have a sense of I. Then it's a reflection of how we're being treated in the world, our personal experiences, relationships socially with girls or boys, sports, success or failures. Those things kind of contribute to this idea of who we are. And then the third one, and the real sneaky one that is the third component in identity, is there's a genetic disposition that at conception we get from our mother and father that produce a certain amount of traits in us that the past generations have used to survive socially. So your reaction to loud noises, certain smells, certain facial shapes, what attracts you and what doesn't attract you, how you respond to fear, that can be a sneaky way that gets in. But I want to point out the reason that I bring up, all three of these things, but genetics, maybe more importantly, is this idea that any one of these three ways that we look at ourselves that has been nurtured and cultured through our inertia of our being to this point can be changed. We don't have to carry the way we felt since we were a young child or experiences or things people said to us. We can change those. Even we can change the genetic disposition once we become aware of it. So quick, tiny example on that, then I'll let you guys respond, is that my father had traits in him in the way he grew up that I liked and things that I didn't like. And so when I noticed myself as I was growing older and got in a relationship and got married, and the way that I was responding, I realized that I was sounding like my father. And so I started to become hyper aware of that so that I could interrupt that pattern. And the more I did it, it took a little heavy lifting at first to really get into the granular, really become self-aware enough when something was coming out of me instinctually. I'm like, well, I never really wanted to be that. Why is that coming out of me? To catch it, to actually say, no, that's not who I am. This is who I want to be, and then change it. It was very uncomfortable at first, but I did it. And then eventually, at some point, the genes expression flipped where I didn't have to think about it anymore. It just became a part of who I am. And hopefully, pre having kids, it was passed on under the new flip switch. And that's really where epigenetics comes in. But anyways, so that's how the identity is formed. Sorry, long answer to a short question, but those three components give us this sense of I, of who we are. And that's why self-awareness it takes to dig in to really understand what you believe is true and where you might be limiting yourself in the world.
If we obviously look at what's a bit more out of our control, the genetics piece, and then also how we were nurtured as a child before the I and the ego became a part of it, setting those two aside, I think the one part that Johnny and I are seeing more and more, especially struggles with our younger clients, is this I component now. The comparison that's driven online in our hyper-connected world is just expanded exponentially. So, when I think about playing sports as a youth, I was comparing myself to teammates who were local in matches that I was playing in my neighborhood. And now we are comparing ourselves across the globe. And because of that, it's really, as Johnny was saying, it's fraying the sense of identity completely, because we're feeling completely lost across this comparison now over billions of people versus in a hyper-localized society where the comparison is amongst your neighbors and your community.
AJ, millennial, elder millennial, I believe, myself, Gen X. Howard, I'm going to guess you're Gen X as well, maybe elder millennial.
Yep. Got it.
And we can see the disconnectedness of identity playing out generationally. Certainly, I know where the gaps were in identity in my growing up. I certainly seen them for millennials. And what AJ is pointing out is something that is incredibly important, because even on the comparison aspect that AJ brought up, we're not being compared to anything other than what the algorithm is deciding to show us. So comparing and contrasting myself to stuff that the algorithm is showing, rather than, if it was people like me all over the world, that would be different. At least they're somewhat like me. But now and some could say, that we are living out idiocracy, right? So like Ow My Balls, the television show that they're watching, that's basically, that could be TikTok if that's what your algorithm is showing you.
Right.
Again, it comes back to just getting centered and having a strong idea of what that is so that you can lean into it. Because without that connectedness, even with the epigenetics and understanding where your family has come from, if you're here, you're still looking at millions of years of evolution that your bloodline has survived that you can lean in on to move forward. You weren't a fluke. There was a lot of strategy, a lot of planning, and a lot of good luck and a lot of hard times that DNA had to go through for you to be here. So talk about power. There is so much power in just your story alone that you can connect to, that we negate due to these algorithms.
But I think that's why self-empowerment is even more important today, for people to get a hold of their own mindset and the way they curate the information that comes into their mind and their senses through the world today, because we're getting it faster and quicker and more purposeful towards us based on what the other side of the algorithm wants than ever before. So to have a strong sense of identity in who you are and what your worth is gives you the power to be able to not let that affect you. And I think that's the key to it in today's world, especially, is to really, really empower young people with this idea that, hey, you're in charge of how you look at you, not that algorithm, not what's coming to you on your social feed. And actually, I believe, social isn't a good or a bad thing. I believe it depends on how you curate it. It can be awesome. You can curate your feed to the most empowering stuff in the world, or great comedy or great music. It just depends on on how your mindset is set up, and where you're either consciously or what you're consciously or subconsciously drawing in to your experience to validate either something good or something bad. That, again, this goes back to self-awareness and why it's so powerful. Because when you wake up to it and you go, wow, I didn't realize that that's what I was drawing in just to validate that I was a piece of, that I didn't matter in the world. And now that I've realized I matter, you know what? I'm going to start flipping through that and not watching that. And my algorithm's going to change.
For a lot of us, that self-awareness comes from a piece of feedback, whether it be a parent, a teacher, an advisor, a coach, a guide, that really makes you stop and think, wow, the reality that I have been perceiving might not be how other people are experiencing me. And that's typically our first experience with self-awareness of like, oh, wow, okay, maybe there are some things here that I need to take into consideration. But, this buzzword of self-awareness is obviously on social media. We've heard it time and time again, but how do we practically develop the self-awareness? I know that's really step one in the book around reaching our potential.
So the first step is you have to decide what your intent is. Is your intent to experience a more joyful, empowered way of living? Are you really ready to step into that? Because a lot of people say they want it, but they're not really ready for it because it's new territory for them. So the struggle, the drama, it's part of their life and their identity. So you have to really decide, what is your intent? Once your intent is to experience more joy, more happiness, more empowerment, more creative ability, more energy, then that's where you have to start to take a look at what you believe about yourself, do an inventory. And in the book, it gives you reflection questions to go through to ask you, do you believe you are worthy? Do you believe you can accomplish these things? In the very first step, it's about infinite possibility, really opening to a universe with no beginning or no end. It's infinitely creative. You're endowed with that. And when you ask most people, what do you believe is possible in the world? They're like, oh, anything. But then when you say, what do you believe is possible for you? That's when the field clamps down, because inside them, there's something saying, I could never do that, or I'm not worthy of love because, 2 boyfriends or girlfriends rejected me and told me I was terrible, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's when the limits start to rise. And those are the things that need to be questioned. So practical steps are really challenging any negative thought. One of the more profound things on my journey I realized was that any negative thought, limiting thought, or self-deprecating idea is a lie or stems from a lie. Because what I think life from a bigger, grander cosmological perspective is trying to tell us is that you have infinite ability and infinite worth in terms of moving towards that ability. Doesn't mean you're going to get there, but you're just as worthy as anybody else of trying to put the conditions together to achieve it. So once you realize that, and a lot of times I tell this to some, even top athletes in the world, I'll say, why is that guy or that woman or that girl any more worthy of you, of what you want to achieve? And they're like, wow, I guess that's a great question, and that's where you can dig in. Those are practical self-reflection ideas to really move you there. And you're going to be challenged big time, because the ego loves to hang on to that story.
Yeah, I mean, these types of questions are very uncomfortable when you really start to unpack them. The journey to self-awareness is you facing things in your shadow, things that you're trying to avoid in your comfort zone by having bad habits and doing things to seek pleasure instead of really digging deeper into who you are and how you're showing up in the world. And then based on how you're showing up, what reality is then being created around those behaviors and actions.
So I just thought of something really important as a practical step on this journey, is that when you remove the poison of guilt, shame, and regret, it becomes easier to self-reflect. When there's ideas of guilt, shame, and regret from something in the past, the ego blocks and doesn't want to listen, doesn't want to respond, doesn't want to reflect. But the truth is that guilt, shame, and regret, past the incidents that gave you the reflection of who you don't want to be anymore, are poisonous to what you're trying to create going forward. They limit you in so many ways, whether it's in the self-reflection or in the action. And this goes to a little bit of a deeper step on this, but what else I realized is that life is trying to match us with who we believe we are. So mind has to become our reality, thought has to become our experience, and I, in that identity, has to work towards am in the validation of it. And if that identity is a really negative, limited idea, not only are you going to make choices that bring that towards you, but life's also, in its divine connection with you, going to find the right people, places, and events to move pieces in to help you complete that creative picture. Again, it sounds like a broken record, but that's how important self-awareness is in identity, because once you realize you're the writer and you can write the story for yourself, yes, it's a lot of heavy lifting in the beginning, but if you can do it, wow. And I've seen this with, so many people, just the transformation, but it's some work in the beginning.
A problem for many of us that we struggle with is that a lot of our experiencing of parenting, some of us in religion, a lot in school, is trafficking on guilt and shame. And a lot of our people that we look up to are holding on to their own regrets. And because of the regrets that they're holding on to, shaping their reality, they're shaping our reality based on those regrets.
That's why it goes back to intent. What do you drive it right back to intent? What do you want to achieve? How does that help you on your path? And immediately, once you get the intention from them, then you can come right with, well, then how does regret or shame help you? And obviously their rational brain's going to say, well, it doesn't. Okay, then how can we move past that, forgive it, leave it in the past, and start fresh? Because, another statement in the work is you're never who you were, but always who you decide to be right now. And that to me is our greatest gift as human beings, is that we get doesn't mean other people aren't going to have memories of us and there's going to be a karmic tale, because there will be, but as long as we still keep plodding along with the new version, eventually it all comes back, the new version pursues.
So we've discussed affirmations on the show in the past, and I know a lot of our audience members have probably seen the SNL skit, and affirmations in pop culture can feel hokey and strange, and a lot of times it's easier to say I am these great things, but in actuality what we're holding on to is I am these limiting beliefs. So we self-label a lot of times around our limiting beliefs. I'm an introvert, I'm shy, I'm unattractive, I'm not interesting in conversation. And these are labels that are associated with our limiting beliefs that allow us to feel comfortable then to not take that action to break free of the limiting belief. And then when we flip it on its head, we go, okay, well, now start saying, I am the things you want to be, the things you want to become. For a lot of our clients, it feels difficult and strange to then be like, well, why am I saying I am these things where deep down, based on these limiting beliefs, I don't feel I'm that? So walk us through getting to that place where the I am becomes empowering versus the I am that a lot of our audience members and clients are facing that is self-limiting.
That's an incredibly spot on point. Like, you can't tell somebody to say I am something that they don't believe. So I've inserted a word in my practice for years that helps people grease the wheel towards it. And if you cannot say I am confident in who I am, or I am, a top ranked entrepreneur in the world, or, I am abundant with money, then you just simply add the word becoming. I am becoming kinder with myself. I am becoming smarter with money. I am becoming more abundant. I am becoming better physically. And that puts them in the process where they know they're on track toward it, and it keeps the wheel greased so the information, the insight they need will keep coming in to help them. But I agree with you. You can't tell people to just take it on. And so many people have used affirmations, and it's just unfortunately, what I call a spiritually empty behavior, because they're stating something with no real, true, authentic belief in it, which really carries the creative power. So becoming is a word that I use that I think is really powerful. And then while they're in that process, they keep working on the worth piece to keep digging into the lie that's in there. And for some people, it can change instantly. For others, it's like hitting a hammer on a brick wall. It's not the 50th or the 70th, but the 100th swing that crumbles it. And they just, until it permeates that membrane of identity and causes that expansion, there's not much you can do about it except keep offering it to them as they want it.
As we've started to recognize through self-awareness that there are beliefs about ourselves, past experiences that we're holding on to, guilt and shame that's guiding us towards limiting ourselves, walk us through the process then to turning those into I am becoming statements and where we should really stretch ourselves then to break free of these limiting beliefs.
Let's take the relationship example. If they want to be successful in a relationship and they have guilt and shame over the way they acted in a previous relationship, then the idea is, how does that guilt and shame help you in this moment? And let me explain to you how it won't help you, because the identity that I am guiltful, I am shameful, I am regretful is a directive to your ego to seek validation of that experience. You're wanting the opposite, right? And then they say yes. It's like, okay, so how can you see that version of yourself that did that was who you were, but not who you are? You have the opportunity to redefine who you want to be in this moment. Yes, it was who you were, but that you did, and you acted out of the best of your mental and emotional ability at that moment, of the best of your consciousness. There's no other truth than that. If you could have done something different or acted differently, you would have. You did the best that you thought you needed to do to survive. Your brain has a survival mechanism. It said, I need to do this because this is what I'm feeling needy of right now. And, whether it was, cheating or whether it was something else that caused the relationship to go sideways. But the most important thing to realize is that version of yourself was the best you had at the time. That doesn't mean you condone it. That doesn't mean you want it. But it's not who you are now. And can you unhook the trailer from your past and go, that's who I was? I finally made peace with it. I accept it. I did it. It caused me a lot of pain and suffering. I'm ready to have something different, and I feel worthy of it. So while it was who I was, not who I am, today I'm starting with a new identity. And today, this is my I am statement. I am loving and caring. I am respectful. I am dedicated. I am trustworthy. And then it's up to you to live that out. And then you get the next moments to do it. And it's a repeating cycle until you actually become it and have and enjoy the fruits and the results of that new energy going forward. But it's a process of disconnecting from the old story and being willing to write a new one.
For a lot of our audience members and certainly our clients too, who love their analytical brains and love getting in there with logic and facts and data to solve the problems in their life, I think one of the big stumbling blocks or frustrations is that they logically understand and this makes complete sense, but then there are these like hidden hooks and clasps that still keep them in that old identity, even though they can do all of the mental work required logistically to get there. There's still the behaviors and actions that are not following along with this new identity that I am becoming. So what are some of those traps that we're falling into that we might not realize that we can't logic our way out of?
The ego loves the known because the known equals survival. And so the old identity was what was known. I don't know who I'm going to be being this version. I don't trust it yet. I don't have enough faith in it yet. I know it intellectually it's going to bring me joy. I don't even know what joy is. I don't know what real love is. Many, many, many millions of people don't. It's actually amazing. And so it's about being willing to go out on that frontier of the unknown and trust that what you don't know that becomes known will be positive for you in your journey. So it really comes down to the F word, really, which is faith. You have to have faith to know that just like every other thought and idea that you've had that life has served, life will serve this new identity and this new idea and this new energy if you give it enough time. You can't plant a seed in the ground and 2 days later dig for fruit. You have to plant the new seed. You have to nurture it. You have to make sure it's getting the right conditions. And when it plucks its head above the soil and encompasses the first storm, you have to bend with the storm and not break and continue to go until you bear fruit. But this is how life works. And if the brain can accept, if the mind can accept that this is the way it works for everything in our existence, I don't care what it is, it's gone through this process. And millions of people who've gone through this and had transformation and change, then it comes down to will. And one thing you cannot push on another human being is will. They have to have a certain level of it. And that's how everybody paces their own experience of time. Some people are very stubborn and just have a higher threshold of pain tolerance to go longer in it. Other people are like, I'm so glad I got this insight and this info. I'm ready to get out of this now. And then the third component that I'll add to this that can help as a tool, the teacher, the more you can fully embrace this optimism and this energy and convey it through your eyes and your being, it has a profound effect. And it helps them with that faith that they need because they're feeling it from you and they're feeling that energy. And it's very helpful to somebody who now trusts. And plus, when you don't look at them with any judgmental eyes, that really helps grease the wheel. So those are some of the things, in putting Invincible out, I hope that so many of the teachers and people that do this work really have these transformations that they can then light up so many people with it, because that's really what does it.
What is key there that you pointed out is this ego's comfort in the past. And I think another component of this, and certainly in the work that we do around building relationships and socialization, is the impact of everyone else's ego around you and who you are. And then the discomfort in others' ego when you start to really work on change. When you've been pessimistic and now you're bringing in optimism, or when you've been struggling in the past and then rationalizing it as, I'm just introverted or I lack confidence, the people in your life, their egos have adjusted to that state of being for you and reflect it back to you. And once you start to change, you actually encounter a lot of resistance from people in your life that you care about, that you thought cared about you. Walk us through, what you say to your clients who, even the execs who, their team has been conditioned to believe that they're only capable of certain things or viewing the world in a certain way based on behaviors. And now their team is giving them resistance to this change that they're trying to bring.
And that's what makes a great leader, right? Somebody that can bust through the old paradigm and the old way of thinking and really lead people into a new idea of something that's possible. That's what makes so many great people, whether it's in companies or just in the world. Step 7 is mastering the challenges and negativity, how to conquer the tests and traps of life. And one of those traps is other people when you change. It's like, if the sun changed its vibrational energy, all the other planets would be completely out of whack, right? And have to reorbit in some way or eject from the solar system, one of the two. And that's really what it is, that people are either going to retune to the new you or they're going to eject. That's up to them. You have to be so strong in your belief that the path that you're on is the best service to you and your mindset and your well-being, that it's more important than anything else. Now, the one person in your life that it's really helpful to really spend time communicating and getting on the same page with and helping them realize this isn't a threat is the companion that you chose for life, because that is your partner, if you have one that you're going through life with. And so I will say it is important to make sure that there's extra time given in that relationship. But really, outside of that agreed upon connection and partnership, everything else is, this is who I am. I'm doing this for the benefit of me. And, I've experienced this so much in life. It's unbelievable. You have to let them be who they want to be, but you have to want happiness and empowerment and a state of mind of peace and clarity above everything else, because they will try and grab you by the shirt collar and yank you back. And they will use every gaslighting, triggering, because they're worried, they're nervous. Not only are you changing, and I don't know who you are, but what you're changing to is reflecting more on me that what I'm not ready to see. And that can be difficult. That can be difficult for them. So you have to be really prepared to go through the process. But again, that's why this work and what you guys do for people is so precious, right? It's like not many people in the world, it's shocking how many don't know this type of material exists. But when you look at top athletes in the world, top entrepreneurs, people in unbelievable relationships, people that have been successful, and if you were able to dissect the way they think, you would see it. You would see the unlimited, relentless optimism in them.
We always talk about how, the mindset piece is the iceberg under the water. So the skills, the strategies, the hacks, the tricks, the stuff that people seek out to solve their problems is that piece of ice floating above the water. But when you look at the top performers, when you look at the execs, when you look at the people that you really look up to, more effort is being spent on mindset than any one of those strategies. The strategies are great to have, but they are completely useless with the wrong mindsets and with limiting beliefs, guilt, shame, embarrassment running your behavior. But the real work is challenging in that regard. It's a lot easier to implement a strategy or a hack and not face the failure and not face the people in your life holding you back or pulling you by the shirt collar. It's a lot harder to wrestle with yourself, find that identity, recognize that the way you were showing up in the world was not only impacting you, but impacting relationships around you, attracting the wrong people to you, and then resetting yourself and that identity, and then all the relationships that stem from that identity, and being willing to walk away from some people, double down on some relationships now that are changing and growing with you. That's where the real heavy lifting is happening. And unfortunately, in the social media world, where it's a 60-second clip and it's a fun image of all the great things you can do, we're missing this really hard work that goes into the success that we're really after around. I look at it as like a gardener going in your mind and looking at what are the weeds that need to be pulled and how are you minding that garden every single day to reach the goals that you have for yourself.
And that's why it comes down to how bad you really want it, right? Because hard or easy is, and I understand what you're saying, AJ, completely. But I also want to point out that hard or easy is subjective. I could use the sports example. How hard was it for Michael Phelps to get up at 3:30 in the morning and swim, 50 laps in the pool to prepare for the Olympics versus a regular person trying to do that? It's near impossible. That's impossible. But yet for him, it was part of who he is. So he just did it. So hard, while it's a term, he gave less weight to that hard than anybody else would because of his intent. And so it's the same thing with people wanting to go through the process. If you've got something special and sacred to offer them as far as a path, then, the first vetting process on someone is, hey, you better be ready because we're going to get you there, but you have to really want it. And you're going to be put to that test to see how badly you want it. So that's the vet. I know people, when they come to see me, all bets are off. I know I have full permission, and, they either, are going to come back a lot or I'll never see them again, but at least in that moment when they show up, I know they're ready for what I'm about to give them. So yeah, it's going to change things. It's going to upset the apple cart. It's going to be the unknown, but no transformation or expansion ever comes without that trepidation and that anxiousness and that uncertainty. It's part of the growth process every time we've ever done anything. And you can think of things in your life. The first time you drove a car, first time you kissed a girl or kissed a boy, the first time you went into a job interview, how nervous you were. I mean, it's endless, right? But these are all parts of these expansions. And this one, I'm so biased on this, I'm sorry, but this is the greatest expansion because this gives you, more of the creative power of life. And it's such a blessing. It's such an amazing insight to have.
You used the Michael Phelps analogy, right? So he's got to go up, he's got to get up, he's got to swim every day. There is so many of us that can do his routine, but you're never going to be able to do it to his level and reap the rewards that he has unless there is an internal mind shift that comes with that. And I think that mind shift, I want to believe that most people understand how valuable it is because that's why we have info junkies. These are the people who just listen to podcast after podcast about doing something they would love to be doing, but yet refuse to get started on it. One day I'm going to wake up and I'm going to decide it's time to start swimming 50 laps every day in order to get in shape. It doesn't happen that way. It happens by you doing the work, going and doing it. And eventually your brain starts to wrap around what that is doing to the body every day. And it begins to re-engineer pathways in the brain to give you a better outlook on it. I know for myself, and I, AJ was there with me while we were living in LA, but I went to the gym every day, and there was days and seasons where it was 2-a-days, and I hated it. I hated every moment of it. But somewhere along the line, a new pathway had opened up and reconnected to where now I can't imagine not going to the gym in the morning. In fact, I am excited for it. And because I'm excited for it, I get more out of it. And it's not by reading more workout pamphlets and workout videos. It's by going and doing the work and allowing the body and brain to, I guess, synergize with each other of what the body is doing, and then the brain reworking it of this is how you're going to do this at a high level. And that takes time for the brain to figure that out. But it's not going to figure it out by being an info junkie. It's going to figure it out by you doing the work and manually repairing and rearranging those pathways.
You have to be okay with vulnerability. You have to be okay being exposed so that you can learn when you're stepping into something new that feels uncomfortable. But that's really well said. That's right. The mind is so geared for the comfort zone at times that when you go out there, it's like, why am I putting myself? I can slink right back to where I was. But it's that push through that separates you from 99.9999% of all other people. And if you really want it, you will go through it. I'll never forget some of the stretches in my life, especially in writing. Just it's unbelievable the crippling nature of fear that can overcome you when you're in the. You're gonna be vulnerable. It's gonna be stretched. You're gonna get feedback. It's incredible. But for those that do it, and the rewards and the fruits are there. That's what's exciting.
For a lot of high performers, this doing piece is also tied to proving to others and not to being themselves. And I think that's where a lot of that struggle, that internal turmoil comes in. How do we make that shift from like, I'm doing this to prove it to my parents or to prove to this person who said I couldn't do it, and I'm just pushing and pushing and pushing, versus I'm actually being like, this is who I am. Not because of anyone else shaping who I am, but actually taking that control. And we see this with a lot of our clients who are high achievers, but they have this link to their achievement and proving it to others and healing some wound in the past, but it doesn't become being. And then they still lack that confidence, and they don't actually get the results that they're truly after by tying it to proving it to someone else.
Right. But they might not get those results because they're based on a false idea of someone else's idea of them, but they might go down the path of self-awareness to get their own healing and come to peace with themselves. So a true path can show up for them to actually go down to fulfill their own self. So either way, it's a win-win, whether they actually get to where they want to go. But I think people have to understand that trying to please someone else or prove something to someone else is like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in it. It's always going to be something else to somebody else. Ironically, you have to come to a place where you see, I'm going to use a big word here, you see your own perfection to really enhance the power of what your soul really wants to do and where its true desires are, to get the real clarity on what it is that you want to do in the world. Again, it goes back to this journey of self-awareness, and I don't mean perfection in any egotistical way. That's defined very well in the book, that it's not that you're better than anybody else. It's just a sense of acceptance that every moment of the journey has unfolded in the best way it can for you to get you to this moment and this insight and this information, and now what you do with this. So there's been a perfection in the process of getting here for your particular unique arc and journey of life. And there's an infinite number of those journeys that we're all on, different set of eyes. But yeah, I can see how people would all be chasing different senses of what they think they want that will give them peace. But the old saying, it doesn't come from the outside, right? It has to come from the inside.
To go along with Johnny's point around, this idea of, okay, I'm working on my thoughts, and I'm tying my analytical mind to all these things that you guys are saying on the podcast, and I'm jiving with it, but the rubber meets the road in the actual doing. And unfortunately for a lot of us, the best laid plans, the most sophisticated, logistical, well-meaning, well-intent mindset work that we do internally before we actually take action can fall apart completely when you get punched in the face, when you face that first failure, when it doesn't go as you thought it would, now that you've created this new identity and you've worked through these limiting beliefs that you thought through. So how do you talk to you, especially obviously a lot of athletes are going to face that failure. They're going to lose. They're not going to reach those goals. How do they build the resilience in the face of failure and setback to stay on this path?
When you truly see that the universe is in a co-creative relationship with you, when a setback occurs or a major challenge occurs that punches you in the face, instead of feeling like something happened to you, you look at it like, what is in this for me? What information can I gather to learn how to add something else to my toolbox, my awareness, and my ability to move forward? And that is resolute faith in life that's trying to help you take your intentions and manifest them in an experiential reality, in an actual experience. You can think you're the best of this or that in the world, but eventually, the journey is working towards that validation, that experience. And then there's a new thing you're chasing. That's just part of the creative journey of life. But I think when you finally realize, and this is what's worked for athletes, is so many of them have been so frustrated because there's such an intensity, as you know, with athletes at the top level. People would be shocked if they knew how intense these people are. But when something doesn't happen, I've moved their awareness to go, okay, let's dig in and let's find out why. Why did you get yourself behind the count again in the at-bat? Well, I was anxious. I didn't want to miss it. So fear started that process, and then it was a self-fulfilling prophecy based on the fear. Let's go with faith that rests them in a more comfortable place. Their eyes are bigger. Instead of jumping on something that's outside the zone, they let it go by, and now all of a sudden it counts in their favor. They're going to see better pitches, just to throw a baseball example out. But it's the idea of being able to look at as a win-win. And that's how the best do it. They're like, okay, I'm either going to succeed or I'm going to learn something. But either way, I'm going to move closer to putting the conditions together to get this formula right. And that is what can help build that relentless pursuit. And that's expounded on in Invincible, that process.
Achievement requires intensity. There's no achievement that is passive in what we're talking about here. In becoming invincible, living into your potential, there requires a level of intensity of you showing up, facing that failure, learning from it, continuing to co-create with your intention and what reality is showing you around who you can become. And I think what often happens, the off-ramp for a lot of us is to just choose the identity that's tied to that failure so you stop having to bring the intensity.
Yeah, that's the slippery, easy slope, right? That's the easy way out, right? Oh, I'll never do it. It'll never happen. And that's where that dark side of life is like always right here, just waiting to just find a weak moment, an Achilles heel to just yank you down. That is why, to be in the most invincible state of mind, most empowered state of mind, you need to have a game plan. You need to be ready. You need to have a daily set of ideals that you're going to follow. And so when that dark side comes up, you're like, you know what? I let it happen the last 3 years because I wasn't prepared for it. And before I knew it, subconsciously, it got me. Not today. And that slight change in intention and focus and awareness, adding up over new days, all of a sudden changes the caliber of your energy. And remember, life's not meeting you with what you want. It's meeting you with who you are based on that energy that's coming out of you. And so as that starts to shift in intensity and will, miracles happen. Literal miracles happen. But you can't attach outcome. You have to do it because you trust it and you're demonstrating true faith. And I think that's a really important point, is how expectation can get us too, right? Like, oh, if I do all these things, then I get this. And life hates to have that pressure put on it. Matter of fact, the more you expect something, the more it'll show you its opposite. So it's a really interesting way of losing yourself in the process and trusting it. But that gets built up by self-reflection work you do, by reading, by seeing what other people have done. I mean, there's been so many people who have failed and dusted themselves off and kept going. It reminds me of that cartoon. I know you guys have all seen it, where someone's digging for some gold and they're in this tunnel. And then one side, they show a guy about to hit the hammer or the axe pick one more time, and there's the gold. And the other guy's turned around and given up. Kind of epitomizes the idea.
The problem for many of us is when we picture that intensity that's required, we envision stress. We assume that it requires stress. And you actually write in the book that it requires a calm awareness to be able to achieve this potential. So how do we cross that disconnect for many of us who are feeling the chaos as stress and feeling the intensity that they need to reach these goals as stress, when in actuality, they need to get to flow and they need to be doing things in a way that's more calm to allow them to reach that potential?
If you learned in the material that life is connected to you by the quality of your energy, of your mindset, and you agreed with that, like people have negative mindset, shitty ideas of themselves, end up, always complaining, always in drama. And you said, that makes sense to me. Would you come out of that realization being more mindful of your mindset or less mindful?
Ideally more.
More mindful, right? And so that hyper awareness that you start to gain allows you to go through life every day with a little bit more awareness, a little more mindfulness. And that's that calmness that I talk about. That's that clarity. And it requires trust and it requires faith for a lot of those quiet moments, because there are a lot of quiet testing moments on this path, and lonely moments. There's tons of them. But it allows you to go through those without giving into that dark side that wants to pull you. And before you know it, momentum will have turned. Things will surprise you. Phone calls will happen. People will enter your space that didn't before. And you'll start to see a shift. But the origin of that shift that you asked the question about comes when you finally look at this material, read it, contemplate it, and go, okay, that makes sense. Now, are my actions aligned with that? Because when you see they're not, it's kind of relieving. It's like, oh, that's why it didn't happen. Not because I'm not worth it, but simply because I haven't put the conditions together. And one of those conditions, not only the exterior conditions, but my own mindset is still shrouded in more fear than more faith. And I got to keep working on that. And that's part of the journey and part of the path. And one that I was on for a long time, of anguish and absolute self-flogging and never good enough and never smart enough, never lucky enough. I mean, it was horrible for years. The amount of mental just trashing I did of myself. And it took the realization of the impact that had on not only my creative output, but also on what is meeting me in that exact match. And once I realized that, I was like, okay, I'm now going to use the term awake. I'm now awake. I'm like, I get it. I have to be, and I can't fake it. That's the other thing. I'm not going to fake this positivity. I'm going to question when it's not there until I get there authentically.
The last piece I'd love to focus on, even personally for myself, and my wife constantly reminds me that we as a couple need to dream bigger. And what's interesting in some of the anecdotes in the book around athletes and their performance that you've coached, is happening later in their career, where like these dreams of hitting more home runs than ever or performing at that level, even science would show is highly unlikely, right? As athletes look at their beginning of their career, their peak of their career, and then the twilight. And for those in our audience who are super analytical and can find all the reasons that dream is too big, what do you say to them, and how can we really stretch ourselves to dream bigger, to set that intention larger so that we can really reach that potential that you talk about?
That's why, they often say you have to have the mind of a child, right? Because a child believes, has wonder in their eyes and anything is possible and everything is an opportunity and curious. And so to get back to that state is to remember that in any moment, truly anything is possible. That is an ultimate truth of existence. We don't know what's going to happen next. When you focus on the negative ideas that life has kind of beat you down with over the years, it limits that field of possibility, and then your actions get skewed towards defining that and validating that. And so to blow it back open, it's, go out and look at the stars. Like, I say in the beginning of the book, and blow your mind on a moonless night somewhere in the camping and take it in, really look at it. Look at some of these images coming back from the Hubble and the James T. Webb. And it's just mind blowing. Like, when you go to the ocean, your mind always expands, So I'm so jealous of you guys over there, because you can go right to the ocean and see this expanse of beautiful space, and it helps you feel more empowered on what the possibilities are. So anything you can do to keep your mind open to the infinite possibilities that truly exist will keep you moving and feeling optimistic, and keep more dopamine and serotonin, which is conducive to that flowing naturally to you, because of that truth. If you really want to create, it has to be from relentless optimism. And if you want the key to what top athlete in the world, a real champion, it is relentless, undeterred optimism.
I think that's a great place to end it. Thank you so much for joining us, Howard. Where can our audience find out more about the book and the work that you do?
First of all, thank you, John and AJ, for having me on. I really appreciate the discussion and appreciate what you guys do every day. So thank you for that. The book can be found at Invincible's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can go to my Instagram for any of the stuff that I put out, or in my bio, there's a link to it. And then my website, howardfalco.com, also has links to Invincible in it as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you guys again for having me. Appreciate it.